Hello everyone. This week our topic is oral language. Professor George here, and hope you're all doing well. My goal today is for you to be able to understand the characteristics, the components of oral language, and then understanding speech disorders. What are some informal and formal assessments that you can use to measure where your student is struggling? So, to begin, what are those components? Well, language can be divided. This is oral language. You have the form, content, and use. So what's form? Form is basically those structural properties of language, the sounds and the written symbols. And now you can divide sounds into phonology. The basic unit of a sound is called a phoneme. So for example, if you have A, B, C, D, what's the sound it makes? A, B. That is what phonology is all about. And then you have morphology. Morphology is, okay, when you put those sounds together, they make a word, and what is the meaning of that word? That's morphology. Syntax is the rules of arranging those words in a sentence. So you have the sound, then you make them into words and you arrange them. That is called the syntax. So when you have morphology and syntax together, that is what grammar is all about. Now, when you talk about the content, that's when you talk about semantics. So semantics is basically being able to know the meaning of language. Once you have all the form, what does it mean? And use is the pragmatics. Pragmatics refers to the ability to use the language, for example, in a social setting. So those are the basic components of language. Now, when you think about the characteristic of speech and language, you have the expressive and the receptive. When you have students, what are some characteristics that you might notice in students in your class? Well, if they have limited vocabulary, or when they're speaking, there's excessive repetition, they have grammar, syntax errors, those come under expressive. Receptive more has to do with understanding. So when you give them directions, are they able to follow oral directions? Are they struggling with understanding humor or figurative language? So when you see any issues in that, you might have someone who might need some assistance with speech and language. So again, let's review a little bit. The components of language, you have phonology, which is the characteristics of language where you have the sounds. So in the receptive, you'd be able to see, are they struggling with discriminating speech sounds? In the expressive level, are they able to articulate those speech sounds? In morphology, which is the rules governing how words are formed, are they able to understand the grammatical structure of the words? Do they use those grammar in words? That's the expressive. For syntax, are they able to understand phrases and sentences? That's the receptive level. Or are they able to use it in phrases and sentences? Semantics, remember, has to do with the meaning. So with the receptive, are they understanding word meanings and word relationships? In expressive, are they able to use those words? And does it make sense when they're talking to you? Pragmatics has to do with those understanding social cues. That will come under the receptive level. And then using language to affect others. That would be the expressive. So once you see that there might be a problem in any of these components or characteristics, you want to do some assessments. So here are some informal assessments that you can do in your class. You can take language samples, have them explain a topic of interest, have them tell a story. You can even record that and notice patterns. You can take the mean length of utterance. What that is have them say a sentence and count how many morphemes or how many words are in that speech. And that is a useful way of progress monitoring, and your textbook has examples of that. You can do a language probe, have a sample of expressive and receptive language. So use some informal language assessments, and then you can talk to a speech pathologist who might do some formal assessments. And these are some formal assessments out there. There's assessments to test their language, their articulation. If they're stuttering, there's an assessment to assess that. If they have expressive and receptive struggles in terms of vocabulary, there's specific formal assessments to assess that. So what do I want you to do next? Our next step is I want you to watch my interview with the speech and language pathologist. I will post that link in Moodle. Read chapter 13, oral language, and then there is a section there on page 263 where you have a snapshot of a student named Ashley and a speech and language evaluation. So I want you to answer those 2 questions in the textbook, and then complete an online Moodle quiz to test your knowledge of the content that we have this week. Thank you all for listening. See you online.